Hey, Luvvie, welcome to Authors at Wharton.
Thank you for having me, Adam.
I could not be more thrilled to have you. I remember the first time I watched your TED Talk, and I've heard so much feedback about it and your podcast and your books and your blog ever since. Every thought leader I know is jealous of how funny you are. Every comedian I know is jealous of how smart you are. This is just not fair, but I particularly love that you've turned Troublemaker into a profession. Tell me how that got started. What was it in your childhood that led you to here?
Oh my gosh. I have been a troublemaker since I was little, like a proud troublemaker who was always letting people know when they did something she didn't like. Okay, like I was the 5-year-old who got in trouble for being like, that's not fair. And I basically never stopped being that girl who was just like, what is happening that I don't like? Can I point it out? Can I help fix it? Because it's not just that I was complaining that I didn't like something. I'd be like, let me help. And I think that just carried through as I started my first blog 18 years ago in college, back when blogging wasn't like anything but playing on the internet. And it really taught me how to speak the truth out loud in public, which in itself is troublemaking. Because they say something like, on average, people lie every 10 minutes in a conversation. And just the idea that I already know I'm not a good liar. I've known this for a long time. My poker face is non-existent. So I figured out it's probably better for me to figure out this truth thing because lying is clearly not going to be for me. But my blog really allowed me to talk about the world as I saw it. And I was just writing in the way that felt most authentic and real and true because I thought nobody was reading, because at one point nobody was reading. But that practice in truth telling and in being this girl for such a long time really carried me forward because people felt like I was almost like the angel on their shoulder who was saying what they were really thinking, but they dared not to say. And it made people connect with my writing. I was a marketing coordinator for a nonprofit. That was my career from 2006 to 2010 once I left college. And but I would come home and write in the evening. I basically I got laid off my job April 2010, and writing took over. But really, actually, no, I still kept marketing because I'm still a marketer at heart. I still do marketing every single day for myself and for some of my clients. But I think writing and the professional troublemaking of it all really meant I was using my words in a way to make people think critically, feel some joy, and compel them to take action to make the world better than they found it. And I make trouble in my own life by always making sure I'm pushing myself past my comfort zone. I make trouble in my career because I am the truth teller by trade. And it's all with the hopes that I am creating work and being somebody who is elevating the world.
Well, you do it brilliantly. And that was not always clear to your employer. If we can go back to your marketing coordinator job, you got laid off and you've written so thoughtfully and entertainingly about why you got laid off. Tell us the story.
Here's the thing. I understand that I was a trash employee at one point. Probably like for the few months before I got laid off, I really feel like I got fired. I feel like they did me a favor by laying me off because I'd be writing blog posts at work. I'd be at work where I'm supposed to be writing marketing campaigns. I'd get that done very quickly. And then I'd be blogging, which I should probably not do that on their dime. And it got so bad that I actually fell asleep in a staff meeting. In a 7-person, okay, this is not like a big 30-person staff meeting. This is a 7-person staff meeting. And here I am dozing off. Could not help it. It was like my eyelids just felt really heavy. And it was just like, okay, now's the time. So when I got laid off, they probably should have just fired me because I was terrible. Not because I was bad at my job. I was just not showing up in the way I should have. And that's because, and here's the thing is, I loved my job. I actually love doing branding, digital strategy, marketing. I love that stuff. But it was really kind of like a signal that I needed to kind of expand. I was bored. I could do that in my sleep. Like I would finish the work I'm supposed to do and still have half the workday left. So it was basically the sign that I wasn't receiving for myself that I needed to move past it. I was comfortable. That's the thing. It's what Whitney Johnson calls like being at the top of your S curve. Oh, I had absolutely gotten to the top and it was already on the decline because I was bored and I should have left. So I took the opportunity to, well, once I got laid off, I basically kept doing what I was doing for the company, but for bloggers, for small business owners, because that really is one of my gifts, is being able to tell stories, which is really what good marketing is. Good storytelling, but also the writing. And that's why I am a good writer, because I am a good storyteller. So shout out to them for laying me off. But what's interesting is my boss, the boss that laid me off, he actually hired me a month later to do a Twitter strategy training at a conference because they knew I was good at this work. I was just terrible.
Wow. Well, you took a job before you went off on your own after you got laid off. What happened there?
So I ended up getting hired to do social media management and social media strategy for a global brand. So after like a year of me looking for a new full-time job, because I still wasn't convinced that this writing thing was what I'm supposed to be doing, I finally got a full-time job. I got hired and I go in the first day and I'm good for the first 3 hours. I start working on a deck. And then around 1 o'clock, this was 2011, around like 1 o'clock, I felt like the walls were closing in on me in this office. I was like, oh God, yeah, no, this is terrible. I cannot do this. I finished the workday. And then I sent out an email. I sent an email that was scheduled to land the next morning that said, thank you so much for the job opportunity. Yesterday was my first and last day. And that's what finally had me say, you are not supposed to be working for somebody else. You're supposed to be doing this work, but under your own umbrella. You're supposed to be doing the writing and then the marketing and then the branding and then the speaking under your own umbrella. Stop looking for another job. So that's when I finally stopped, because I found resumes. I found in my inbox, I was sending out resumes up until probably like December 2011.
Well, it raises a few questions for me. The first one is, you wrote this book about fear and overcoming fear. And I cannot imagine how much fear you were facing in that moment, because you've gone from laid off to now quitting a job on your first day. You're going off the track of having an employer, knowing that there's a predictable life ahead of you. Right. How did you find the courage to strike out on your own?
I don't even think I found the courage to strike out. I feel like the fear basically kept blowing up in my face. The fear not to kept blowing up in my face. Me feeling like it was too big of an idea for me. I didn't think about being an entrepreneur growing up. So I was afraid of like that uncertainty. And so I think each time that I tried to run away from it, it blew up in my face. So, the job that I finally got, the actual physical discomfort I felt by being there convicted me into saying, okay, it's not that the job is terrible. It's exactly what you applied for. It's exactly what you thought it would be. But now you feel uncomfortable having to now report here every day and now have this tight structure around you again. And that's when I realized, okay, I am afraid. I don't know what this is going to look like, but I got to try, because that discomfort is not cool. So, and I think that discomfort was actually even worse than the discomfort of not knowing.
So you overcame the fear there, but then you got a big invitation a few years later to stand in a red circle, and you declined. Yeah. Tell us about why, and then how you overcame your fear of the TED stage.
Yes. My first book, I'm Judging You to Do Better Manual, came out September 2016, hit the Times list, and had me on the road basically every 3 or 4 days. So 2017, I had 50 speaking engagements. In about May, Pat Mitchell was curating TED Women, and she invited me to speak. And I was like, yikes, can't do that. Not going to be able to do that. I'm already doing too much. And TED is almost like a part-time job. So I was like, no, I can't make it happen because I have too much going on. And I was afraid. What really was there was that I was afraid that I didn't have enough time and preparation in my large calendar to really kill it. I was afraid that I was going to get on that stage and bomb. I was going to do maybe just okay. And they would be like, you know what? Never mind. I was thinking about the doomsday scenario of, if I get on the TED stage, bomb, will my speaking career be done? So they asked me again, and I ended up saying no. Then the third time, 3 weeks before TED, I told them, I said, I can come to TED for a day to just cheer on my friends. And when I said that, they were like, well, if you can come, we want you to speak. I was about to turn it down for the third time. I wrote the email out to Pat Mitchell, the 3-paragraph email that was like, thank you so much for your consideration. Really appreciate it. Definitely can't make it happen in the next 3 weeks. And I called one of my friends, Unique Jones Gibson, and I said, hey, this wild thing keeps happening. They keep asking me to speak at TED. And I think it's crazy. Right now, it's 3 weeks before, and they want me to speak. But everybody else who's speaking has already had a coach, and they've already had their talk rehearsed 1,000 times. So who am I to like jump in 3 weeks before? And Unique said to me, everybody ain't you. She was like, the fact that you've been on the road every 3 days is your coaching. The fact that you've been speaking for, at that point, 8 years, that's been your coaching. I need you to get off my phone and go write this talk, and you kill it. And she hung up before I could argue. And I was like, oh my God, okay, I guess I'm gonna go do this. And I ended up writing my TED Talk in an Uber, by the way. I write this thing in an Uber on the way to the airport to another speaking engagement, thinking that they were gonna receive it and say like, you're right, Luvvie, you weren't ready for this. Never mind. I landed in whatever city I was going in. They were like, we love it. We only had 2 edits. I was like, what is this? Like, they did not let me have reasons to say no. So I got on that stage after memorizing the talk 3 hours before. I only rehearsed on the stage once, and I was holding my iPad the whole time. While I was on the stage, I was actually telling them to delete slides behind me. I'm like, I don't need that anymore. Delete that. So I was still making active changes to the talk 3 hours before. I stepped on the stage and I gave this talk like it was something I'd done 1,000 times. It was so natural. It flowed out of me like it was actually nuts, because I was like, whoa, there were no ums. There was no, I forgot the thing. The TED Talk that ended up being published a month later, and it was the first one from that event that they decided to feature, was exactly the talk I gave. There was no editing magic that was necessary. And, it really was something that convicted me and let me say like, this thing that I almost didn't do that did transform my life, especially is giving me currency as a speaker, as a thought leader. I almost didn't do it. I almost did not do it so many times. So I'm like, how many times do we actually really let fear talk us out of what makes perfect sense for our lives? How many times do we do that thing? And how much have we missed out on because of it? So we clearly have to be intentional about not doing it, because it's easy to fall into fear. Choosing courage is an intentional decision. Fear and being afraid, that's natural. But the choice to move forward is intentional.
We've talked about imposter syndrome, and obviously you're describing a version of that.
Yes.
Do you still feel it, and how do you make sure it doesn't hold you back?
Yes. I still feel imposter syndrome, but I think it shows up for me not by saying that I can't do something. My imposter syndrome is I have to overwork while I'm there to prove that I earned my way into it. So that's my version of imposter syndrome, is that I will constantly be like, I have to make sure that they know that I can bring value. So it shows up as overwork.
Mm-hmm. That sounds about right.
Yep.
I wonder, there's another side of this that I found surprising. So we've talked a bit about fear of failure.
Yeah.
You've also said you were afraid of success. And I just have to pause on that for a second, because success is supposed to be the thing that everyone wants. When I surveyed my students in the fall and I asked them, what's the most important value at Wharton? And then I made a word cloud. Success was bigger than all the other words combined. And so I don't see a lot of fear of it, but you have a really interesting way of explaining this that actually makes me wonder if this is much more common than I realized. Explain.
Yes, I absolutely think fear of success is wildly common. And what it shows up often as, when people don't realize they have the fear, is self-sabotage, where you'll see somebody get an amazing job, like the job that is the dream job, and all of a sudden they suck at it, or they're late all the time, or they drop major balls. It's because we're afraid of what happens and what has to change if the plan does go well, right? For me, fear of success looks like, holy smokes, if I do sell 1 million copies of my book, Do I have the team that can make sure that can support me in that way? Right? If I do very well in the TED Talk, how many more people would know my name? How many more targets is that sending my way? If we do succeed past the point that we know is comfortable for us, what are the systems around us that will break because they weren't ready for the pressure that causes? I think fear of success is one of those things that we don't talk about enough because we think it's something else. Like our behavior shows up as something else when we're afraid of success. But I think oftentimes it shows up as self-sabotage, and people don't understand what it is. Is when you start school and then you flunk out of a class that is super easy. And you're like, there's really no reason for you to have failed it. But is it that you are now in a space that you're not sure how to control it? Is it that you're afraid of what comes in the level up?
So it sounds like you could see the fear of success manifesting as a fear of change, a fear of responsibility, a fear of extra pressure.
Yep.
There are all these traps that come along with success.
Yep.
How do you prevent those from holding you back?
One, by knowing when you're doing it, when you are afraid. You know, I think knowing when you're starting to self-sabotage is big. So for example, when I had to write this book, my manuscript was due in May 1st, 2020. The world shut down March 11th, 2020. So here I am. At that point, I still only written about a quarter. So you would think I'd be like, oh my God, I have to make sure I write. I end up procrastinating and sitting on my couch for like the whole month of March. And I remember going to therapy and my therapist saying, so how's book writing going? And I was like, I mean, if writing looks like me not writing, it's going great. I have not put any pen to paper in 3 weeks. And she's like, so what's going on with that? And I was like, what do you mean? She was like, what are you afraid of that is stopping you from doing this thing that you know you have to do? Like, what are you actually afraid of? And it was in that moment I was like, what if it actually does go well? Like, maybe I am kind of afraid of like what this book could do. And she was like, that's self-sabotage. You are currently self-sabotaging because you don't want to get this done because you're afraid of what's on the other side of it. And I was like, yikes. And she was right. I do think oftentimes that fear of success is called fear of something else. Fear of change. Yeah.
Well, it also makes me wonder about something, which is one of the many things that so many of your fans admire about you, which is I think we have growing recognition at least in American culture, that Black women have to constantly prove themselves, that they have to be perfect. They have to be excellent at all times.
Yeah.
And you've managed to create this lane to be authentic and vulnerable and say, I got laid off. I fell asleep in a meeting. I've had all these stumbles and I'm still afraid.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us a little bit about how to express that vulnerability without leading people to doubt your competence?
Yeah. So that's a great question. I think the real journey, like as we think about how we show up in the world, the one thing that is true, especially in communications and storytelling, is people always love the hero's journey. People love the hero's journey. The person who is now standing on the pedestal was not always there. And actually nobody belongs on pedestals. That's its own different story. And that's actually a really good point, is that the pedestal is kind of invisible and built by people, but they didn't start there. Anybody who starts there, the story is not interesting. If you've always been there, then what do I learn from you? What lessons got you there? So for me, I'm not shy about sharing the lessons because I need people to understand that whatever they see as thought leadership or expertise is a whole bunch of lessons cobbled together that created this person who they are today. And for me, I would never call myself an expert at anything but my own story. And my story is one of mistakes and me growing because of them. And who I am today is more of a guide. I'm not an expert, I'm a guide. I've been certain places, I've made certain mistakes so I can point to hopefully somebody else making fewer mistakes. My goal is to be like, I will show up excellent today. I wasn't always excellent. I've done work and will continue to do work that I am proud of. And that work is what allows me to tell the story of when I did not have it together. And also the vulnerability lets us all know that, and to your point, and think again, the idea that we are ever evolving individuals who are never at the peak of having our shit together, right? I will never say, oh my God, I am as amazing as I will ever be. I have nothing more to learn. So I might still make a mistake today, but that mistake would not be a story in a year. And I think that's important for all of us to know, is there are no real experts at everything. We are all humans who will continue to make mistakes, but those mistakes will allow us to grow. So yeah, I just have to be excellent in the work that I do so my name can stand up in the rooms that I'm in, so that my mistakes of the past really do show that I'm using them as stepping stools.
One of the things that I think is amazing and inspiring behind the scenes there is your inner monologue. There are days when I think if I could have your voice in my head, I would take a lot more risks. I would also have a lot more fun too. Can you walk us through some of your self-talk, the things you say to yourself when you're hesitating to get on stage or you're afraid to put a new idea out there?
Yes, that's a great question. So one, when I am afraid, I do listen to music. So I listen to music. I have playlists of music that hype me up, because I think music just gets directly to your core, to where you need to go. But my own self-talk looks like, it's like Esther Perel asked me, like, what is the difference between the voice of your fear and the voice of your troublemaking? So my own self-talk is usually the voice of my fear being interrupted by the voice of my troublemaking. So if I'm like, okay, so I want to do this thing. It's kind of scary. I'm constantly running the monologue in my head. That's kind of scary. I don't know. And then my troublemaking voice will come in and be like, but okay, so what's scary about it? Okay, I don't know how it's going to turn out. All right, but how many things have you not know how it turned out and it went well? A lot of things. Well, okay, well, just try it. What's the worst case scenario then? And then I'll sit there and like write down what could go wrong. Okay, and then I'll ask myself the question of, how likely is it? And I'll then also ask, if that does happen, can you deal with it? And if I'm like, yeah, I can deal with it, it's not that bad. Okay, then what's the best case scenario? So if that happens, could that be transformative? Yeah, that could actually be amazing. All right, so you get that done. So sometimes I'll bring the voice that's in my head on paper by asking those questions and putting the answers down so I can see it in black and white. So then the voice becomes actually something concrete to read. And then I move from there.
You studied psychology. It shows. You mentioned, I mean, it definitely shows. It's music to my ears. But you also mentioned a few minutes ago having a therapist, which is something that I think is still stigmatized in too many parts of our worlds. Do you think everyone should have a therapist? How do you make that conversation productive? Tell us about your view on therapy.
I think everybody should have a therapist, because even when we think we are fine, we're not as fine as we think we are. We might not have had any disastrous things happen in our lives. So we're like, why would I go to therapy? Nothing disastrous. My life has been okay. But we carry a lot of traumas and triggers that we don't realize. It's like a whole bunch of paper cuts. You don't notice it, but then you pour something on it and you finally feel it. You're like, ouch, that hurt. How we move through the world and how we deal with everything is, as you know, all the subconscious stuff. And because it's subconscious, we're not always active about it. A lot of people don't want to do therapy because they're like, I'm fine. Are you? Or do you have certain triggers you don't realize you have? And for me, I never thought I had traumas, because I've had a pretty decent life, I thought, okay? But that's because I didn't have words to things that happened. Moving from one continent at the age of 9 is absolute trauma. I didn't call it that. I didn't have words for that. And I didn't realize and hadn't figured out how that could even affect how I show up. So yeah, I want to normalize the talk about therapy by always talking about therapy. So my therapist suddenly passed away in January, 2 months ago. Shocked my system, and I took 2 days, and then I wrote about it, because how I process stuff is I write, and then I posted it online, and so many people connected with me who were like, oh my God, I'd never thought about my therapist dying. One, some people connected to say, my therapist also died during COVID. I didn't even talk about it because I didn't know how to grieve about it. Some people were thinking, I thought about going to therapy, but now you really make me want to go, because I talked about the impact of what she did in my life. And I actually talked about how I processed her death based on how she dealt with me in therapy. So it started this big conversation around, yeah, therapy. Thank your therapist, the fact that they're regular humans. I want us to normalize these things. The talks about fear, the talks about vulnerability is, and therapy is all a big part of that. It's the tool that we all need to use to process the world. It's one of the tools, right? One of them. And yeah, I still do have my psychology training behind me a little bit, but I just started doing therapy 4 years ago. So it wasn't like I was even in therapy after college when I got my degree. It was like, it took a minute, because I thought I was fine. I was like, I'm fine. One of my friends was just like, have you thought about going to therapy? And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna try. And I loved it.
One of the other things that I have to ask you about, because it's so delightfully countercultural, is we're constantly being encouraged to be less judgmental. And John Haidt was our last guest, and he said his most important advice in a polarized world was to be slower to judge and quicker to forgive. And here you are saying, I'm actually judging you, which I think we need a little bit of in society every once in a while. Can you share a little bit of your perspective on when it's helpful to be judgmental and when it isn't?
Yes. So my first book is called I'm Judging You. And I remember when I was calling it that, and I was like, they're probably going to make me change it, but I'm going to put this in the proposal anyway. Because the whole premise is that I am judging us. I am judging the world, and that's okay. To say anything less is to lie. We say, let's not judge, but we're all absolutely, even the human brain is programmed to instantly make judgments. As much as people want to say we're not judging, we are. My thing is, we're judging each other on the wrong things. We will see somebody, see how dark they are, and throw all these projections of who we think they are at them. That's the judgment that's not cool. We'll see how many pounds somebody weighs and throw judgments at them. What God somebody is worshiping or not worshiping. Who somebody loves. We are forming judgments about people's cores every day. And I'm saying, what we need to judge is how we are each showing up as people, how we are each adding or subtracting to the world's good, how we are each being a part of a group that's being oppressive. That's what we have to judge. We need to judge and say, listen, you're not being kind because you're not speaking up for this person, or you're not being kind because you are denigrating this person, or you're not respecting somebody's choice, of who they love, what they do, whatever that thing is. So I want us to be less shy about saying we're judging, but I just want us to judge the right things. Don't judge somebody for their weight, their religion, their gender identity, orientation. Judge people for are you using your power for the greater good? Are you being of value when you're in a room? Are you being kind to somebody who can do nothing for you? Are you somebody who you say you are, whether in private or in public? I think that's worth judging.
I would love to live in a world, and I can't think of a better place for that world to exist than Wharton, where people are judged less for the success they achieve in their career and more for the character they develop in their lives. And it sounds like that's what you're pushing us toward.
Absolutely. Honestly, our careers are these fluid things. They're these things that they cannot be the totality of who we are. And I think a lot of times people will sacrifice their personhood for career. By meaning you forget who you are if it's not tied to a particular title or job. And that's why we have to know, that's why for me, purpose is more important than title, because whether or not I call myself a writer, I'm doing this particular work. But let's say I decide not to write for a year. Do I lose myself? Right? Do I then become less valuable as a human because I'm not that person? If I was to get fired, am I now going to be devastated and think I am not worth anything or I'm not enough? So yeah, I think it's more about just our characters. We have to be able to be the people that we want to see in the world. Like we have to be the person who, when nobody is watching, we are still being as honorable and integrity driven as we say we are when everybody's in the room.
I think I could get behind that. Let's go to some audience questions. We've got a whole list of interesting questions for you, and I'll sprinkle in a few as well. One is, why do we see physical risks differently than social risks? We're afraid of skydiving, and that's okay. But it's much harder to talk about, to overcome our fear of pursuing a non-traditional career path, for example. And how do you take the courage that you might have developed around overcoming physical fears and apply it to social fears?
Yeah, I mean, those physical fears are actually the way to kind of give perspective to what fear's usefulness is, to keep you from putting your hand in fire and jumping in a volcano, right? That same thing will now keep you from asking for the raise or going for that job or having that tough conversation. So I think you just have to give it that perspective. Am I actually in danger? When we think about fear and when we think about doing things that feel big, asking yourself, what is it I'm actually afraid of? Like, what have I built up as a dragon in my head because of this fear? If I am afraid of taking an action or saying something because I think it's going to be catastrophic when it's really not, then it gives me the perspective that, okay, I've exaggerated what it is. I have made it something that is not as big as I think that is in my head. It's like running down a dark hallway. You get to the other side of the hallway and you're like, oh, that wasn't that bad. I spent a lot of time just scared of the dark hallway, all the things that could be in it, but there was nothing in it. It wasn't that bad.
If you do have questions that you want to submit live, use the hashtag Wharton Authors on Twitter. We're collecting them there. We have a bunch. There's a related one, Luvvie, which is, in your fight against fear, how do you balance courageous pursuit with reckless drive?
Ooh, courageous pursuit with reckless drive. I actually don't think drive should be reckless. I do not think drive should be reckless. I do think that's when people get lost in the sauce. That's when you lose yourself in it all. When the drive is reckless, when you think I will do it no matter what the cost is. Some things are too expensive. That reckless drive can be very expensive. But I do think there is dedicated drive, right? Focused drive for a hot second. For example, like during my book launch, I was very driven because I was like, okay, I'm on this mission. And I did a lot of work. And I did like 40 podcasts. It was just like, I did days where I was doing press for 10 hours. Reckless drive is if I kept that up throughout the year, right? Courageous pursuit is knowing that that was very temporary. And there's an end to it. There's a deadline to that. So I think that's the difference, is for the moments when you have to be reckless, right? When you go beyond your boundaries and you do the thing that's really hard, you just know it's temporary. It's like a 100-meter dash. After the 100 meters, stop, recoup. But you can't sprint 26 miles. Your body will fall apart. So same thing.
As much as some of our investment bankers have tried, yes.
Listen, and their bodies fall apart. It's not sustainable.
Next question is, you say the point of exercising our truth-telling muscle is not to be fearless, but to charge forward regardless. Can you expect it to feel easier over time? Does it get easier for you as you speak truth to power more often?
Sometimes it does get easier over time. Certain things might get easier over time. I want us to not expect it to have ease attached, because when we expect it to have ease attached, for the moments when it doesn't, we think we should retreat. Don't expect ease. Hopefully you build some of the ease into it, but don't expect it, because everything is different. So it's not like you all of a sudden get to a point where you're like, oh, I can speak up anywhere about anything without any fear. No, you might get better about challenging your colleagues and then find it really hard to have a conversation with your mom. So fear will always present itself in different ways. And I think the ease will come in you knowing that, okay, I'm familiar with this discomfort. I've felt it before, but I'm going to charge forward anyway. That's knowing that this feeling is no longer strange. The feeling is no longer strange, and you're not like, oh my God, I don't know how this is. You're like, no, I felt this before. I know exactly how this feels because I felt this the last time I had to do this hard thing. But that hard thing also panned out well. So hopefully that now reinforces to you that you should go forth.
That reminds me of something that historians have captured that apparently people did back in the 1500s. They would deliberately read sad stories so that they knew what depression felt like in case they ever had to go through it. And it sounds like you're encouraging us to do a version of that with our own everyday fears, to say, look, if you confront those, if you speak up a little bit more often, then when you do have to raise something that's a little bit more risky or personally threatening, then that feeling won't be completely foreign to you.
Facts. So we have to be able to tell the truth and be honest and do scary things in the small moments to build the muscle for the big moments. It's like you don't go from lifting 5 pounds to lifting 100. You got to lift 10 and then you do 15, then you do 20. So people are always thinking, oh my God, in the big moments. If you have not done it in the 5-pound moments, you can't do it in the 100-pound moments. And it's basically like exposure therapy, right? Like the more you do it, the less daunting it is the next time. So whether that's ease or not, it would just become less foreign. And yes, you have to kind of make yourself do it for those times where it doesn't matter, where you're like, oh, it's a small thing, doesn't matter. I actually don't have to say anything. No, that's probably the moment when you should. So then when it does really matter, you're like, been here, done that, got the t-shirt. It was kind of rough, but I'm still do it anyway.
So as a highly agreeable person, are you saying that I should practice telling my friends that they have food in their teeth to get in the habit?
Oh my God, please do. Tell them that they have lipstick on their teeth, food in their teeth. Yes, please do. You have to. Because so when you have that and you see that friend about to make a catastrophic mistake, you can be like, all right, I told them to have food in their teeth that last time. I told them the haircut was kind of weird, but because they asked me. Because here's the thing is they need you to look out for them. I need to know that there's food in my teeth. So me as your friend needs to be able to be like, Adam will let me know. So then if I write a chapter for my next book and I say, Adam, read this. What are your thoughts? You can be able to say, I think you should rethink these 2 paragraphs. And here's why. Because if you don't have the language for the moment I have the spinach in my teeth, it's going to be hard for you to challenge me about that chapter you want me to edit.
Yeah. That goes to another question from our audience, which is, can you speak to your personal journey of overcoming the fear of hearing no? Mm-hmm. And what advice can you share with other people who might be afraid of being told no?
What I think about is Hangover. You know when they say, but did you die? When he says, but did you die after that crazy night of shenanigans? And they're like, oh my God, we cannot believe what you just made us do. And he was like, but did you die? I'm not saying go on a hangover binge, but a lot of the things attached to the fear of no, we're afraid. We're just simply afraid of the discomfort that comes with it, because usually the no does not put you in any type of danger. The no that you receive from somebody else at most hurts your feelings. At most, it just hurts your ego. But we treat the no like it's the dragon. Like the no, like when we get the no, it's going to eat our head. So I think that's where it comes in when you put it into perspective. If you get the no, what happens to you? What is the real damage behind the no? So you want to apply for a job, but you're afraid you're not going to get it. So you go, I'm not going to apply for it. Okay. So what happens if you don't get the job? Are you not just in the same place you are right now? Not bad, right? If you ask for that raise and you get a no, you're still making the same salary. We think of the no as a catalyst for disaster. We think the no is a gateway to hell, and it's not. It just is a no. It's like asking somebody out. There's so many people who will be like, oh yeah, I have a crush. Have you asked them out? No. Why? Because what if they say no? Then you go on 0 dates, which you're on right now. Like, it's just so, we give no so much power that we will make us opt out of the best case scenario because we're afraid of the worst case scenario, which is really net zero. Worst case scenario is usually net zero. But best case scenario could be you end up getting married to the person you just asked out on the date. The best case scenario could be, oh my God, you got that job, your dream job. Yeah.
I agree. And I think it reminds me a little bit of, something that I hear from our students a lot, which is, I'm afraid to ask, especially if somebody is busy or in a position of power or status, because I don't want to cash in all my chips or burn the bridge. And if I ask for this thing, I can't ask for something else. Or if I ask for the wrong thing, maybe they won't want to help me in the future. And the first thing I always think of when I hear that is the classic Cialdini work on the door in the face, where if people turn down a big request, they're more likely to say yes to a smaller request out of guilt. And so it's not like one no will automatically lead to another no. But there are times when you make an unreasonable request, or you ask for something that leads people to question your judgment. And I just wonder how you draw the line, or how you know whether you've crossed that line.
So one of my coach offered me up this thing when I said, I don't want to reach out to you in Slack if it's too late, because I don't want to bother you. Jill said, my Slack is on no notifications when I'm not available. What I need you to do is don't manage my boundaries for me. What we do when we are afraid of other people, like responses to our question or our ask, is we are managing their boundaries. Don't manage my boundaries. That's why I have mine. I'll be able to say, no, I can't do that. And it's not a no, I can't believe they asked me necessarily, unless you ask them egregious stuff, right? Some people, but most people are not asking egregious stuff. Hey, the person that you've been following online that you've been like, oh my God, I would love to meet up with them and go for coffee. You send them an email. Hey, I'm a huge fan. I'd love to go for coffee. And I've gotten this request. I'll simply say, hey, I don't even have time for people who are in my tribe. I'm currently head down right now working on a book. I can't do a coffee, but we could do a 10-minute Zoom, right? In that moment, if they never asked, they never would be even offered that. We're not asking for egregious things. Some people are. And yes, if you are asking for something egregious out of the scope of what makes sense, check yourself. But most people are not. You're asking for something. Get used to the no, because just know that the no is not no, never. Sometimes it might be no, not now. Sometimes it might be no, I don't do this anymore, but I know somebody who does. Sometimes it might be no, I don't have the capacity. Reach out to me in 3 months. So no is not always just no, get out my face. That's not what's going to work. A no can still open up a door for you, and you have to be willing to take the chance, and then also be willing to hear the no, never. And then okay, either I need to change my approach, or I was being egregious and asked for something that was actually wild. So you learn something either way.
Yeah, I think that's such a helpful reframe of what a rejection means, right? It's not you're stupid and ugly, and I would never consider going on a date with you in a million years, right? It's like, This wasn't the right ask or the right time.
Correct. It's not a rejection of you, and it's not an indictment of you. I think we take the no as an indictment, a personal character indictment, and it's not. If a person says no for even whatever reason, a lot of that might not be about you.
You've also given some great guidance in responding to this on how to say no. Do you have any other favorite tips for setting those boundaries?
Setting boundaries. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Like setting boundaries and honoring them is really important. And I think the reason why a lot of people are worried about, well, I don't know whether they'll say this, is because not enough of us manage our boundaries properly. Because you are not managing your own boundaries, you're expecting everybody else not to manage theirs either. So then you're like, no, they'll say yes just because they're being nice. No. Like I always tell people, when I say yes, it's because it's a yes that I meant. It's a yes, and if I say no, it's a no that I'm honoring my boundaries because of. It's not an indictment of you. My yeses, I mean it. My no's are protections of my boundaries. So we have to also do our own part in managing our own boundaries and making sure that we're not constantly letting other people cross the lines.
Let's broaden this beyond no. Let's talk about the broader challenge of professional troublemaking. Another audience question here is there ever a time to retreat from professional troublemaking if it feels too stressful or even dangerous?
Yes, if it feels dangerous, if it is going to be catastrophic for you, feel free to retreat. If you are like, I can't speak up in that meeting because if I speak up, I'll be fired. If I get fired, I have no savings account, so I'll end up homeless. Sure, be quiet. But how often is that the case? Sometimes professional troublemaking, especially for men, looks like men stepping back and being quiet in a meeting. It looks like saying, hey, this person hasn't spoken much. I'm going to give them the floor. It looks like pointing to the intern and saying, hey, we'd love to hear your thoughts. It looks like not dominating the space if you're usually the person who's dominating the space. So sometimes professional troublemaking for me looks like me stepping back and saying, in this meeting, I will say nothing. Y'all let me know what you need from me. I will give very little input and just ask you guys questions. That can be troublemaking for me because usually I will dominate the space if I'm in a meeting with my team. Sometimes it's me saying, don't even invite me to the meeting. You don't need my input. So, yeah.
Well, I have to object on that one, Luvvie. I can't think of a time when I ever would want you to stop speaking. But I get that sometimes you want to empower your team and you want them to come up with their own ideas. And I respect that you're trying to develop their leadership skills. But I think we need more Luvvie in the world, not less.
Let me tell you, Adam, this is why I actually very rarely do panels. I only do either keynotes or fireside chats. Because me on panels, I am hyper aware of how much space I take up. If it's a panel of 4 or 5 people and a question is asked and I answer the question first, the second question, I'll be quiet until they call me. Because very quickly, if I let myself speak, I will dominate the panel. Now, what usually happens is because I am being cognizant of not taking up all the space, I actually let more people speak. And then afterwards, people go, damn it, we wish we heard more from Luvvie. And I'm like, see, this is why I just need to do keynotes and fireside chats, because me on panels, I'm like, I want to make sure everybody's heard. I will contribute, but because I'm stepping back to ensure I'm not dominating the space, people still want to hear more from me. And because people just want to hear more from me, they just want to hear more from me. So I'm like, you know what? Panels are probably not the best use of my time. You guys should come see me on Actual Talk.
I think that's a fair choice for you, but
right?
I think it would be pretty exciting if we could have more conferences and more meetings where we actually expect women and people of color to be the ones who take up the space for once.
Word.
Right? Just once.
Absolutely. And this is also why I typically try not to be the only woman of color on a panel or the only Black woman on the panel. And if I am, I'm like, you know what? Yes. In that point, then okay, I can take up space. Let me take up all the space because y'all always talking. So yeah. But if I'm on a panel with other women, especially, I'm always cognizant of like, I want to make sure the person who has not spoken in the last question that was asked gets to speak. And it's just to make sure that I understand and I'm valuing other people's stories and voices along with my own.
Well, that goes to another student question, which is, what is the role of allies in truth-telling? And more broadly, what are the deliberate strategies you use to make sure that your efforts are driving big change?
Yeah. The role of allies in truth-telling is that allies must speak up in the rooms where the person who needs to have a voice is not present. You know, if I'm in the room, if I'm at the table, I need to be proud of what happens there. I need to be making sure that if we walk out the room and somebody says, oh, this thing that is coming out of that room, were you proud of it? I want to be able to say yes. I always ask myself, will my silence make me proud? Will my inaction convict me? And then allies also in the room where there is somebody there who needs to have a voice. Yeah, yielding your space and your own voice and saying, hey, I'd like to hear from them. And then also now loaning them your currency. So backing up what they said. Oftentimes people will leave a meeting and be like, oh my God, I'm so glad you said that. That was great. But why didn't you say it in the actual room when I needed to show the social's currency? So yeah, be who you are in public or in private. Loan your voice, not just when nobody's watching, especially when people are watching. And then when nobody's watching, also do that too. Be that person, whether in public or in private, and that is allyship. Action. Allyship is action, not just you being like, oh, I empathize. Empathy is fine. We start there. Action is next, and it's required.
That goes to another one, which is, you mentioned your tribe. What qualities do you look for in those people? And how does that change if you're thinking about them as mentors as opposed to allies?
Yeah. I think of community as a verb. You know, these are the people who will show up for you sometimes in ways that you're not even sure you need. And I include mentors in that, friends. I absolutely include just anybody who is in my midst, who I'm like, I can call you, I can speak to you. And there are some people in my community who I can't even call, but people who I just care about. I care about humanity, even though sometimes I don't like people. I love people, but I don't like people because people aren't as kind as they should be. So for me, community looks like me being the person that I want to see. So what community means is, yeah, when I am in community with you, when I have access to you, you can trust me to watch out for you. You can trust me to come to you with my honesty, my thoughtful honesty. You can trust me to show up. So if Adam, if you're like, hey, Luvvie, I need you to do this thing. Could you do this thing? I wouldn't want you to doubt my answer, right? And I think that's what we all have to do for each other as a community, whatever community looks like, is that I want each of us to be able to trust our words even more and our actions that's going to follow it. So yeah, my mentors, I can call them and say, hey, I'd love to do this thing. Do you know how I can make it happen? And they'll be like, let me make a call. And it's because they know that they can also call me and do the same thing. And say, like, so that's why I always want to be earnest and transparent about what my intentions are, what my wants are. That's why I dream loudly, and I'll say some things out loud that I might have not have thought too hard about, but I'm like, because I know that somebody in my community might be listening who can make that happen for me.
Well, I have something I want to ask of you.
Yes.
And you can feel free to say no.
Yes.
But I think it would be amazing if you taught a class at Penn one day. What would make that interesting and fun and meaningful for you? Like, what would that class look like?
So fun fact, one of the things that I wrote down in my vision statement from years ago was that I wanted to teach a class at a college, at a university. I've been said that. Like, it's been one of those dreams I was like, oh, maybe it'll happen when I'm 50. That would be amazing. I think that would be incredible. I would absolutely love that, because I see myself as a teacher, because I'm also a forever student. I'm forever trying to grow. And also, like, part of the reason why me as a writer works is because of the fact that I just always love telling people what I know to be true. That would be amazing. Like, you be hitting my vision statement 20 years in advance.
I think we can get that ball rolling. What do you want to teach? Do you want to teach professional troublemaking? Do you want to teach something on marketing and social media? Where would you start?
Oh my God, everything. So I'll even give you an example. My book launch. You've seen the book rollout. I did that. Like, I pulled out my full marketing and strategic brain and was like, how do we make this book fly? And then make it look good, make sure the stories sound good. So I am deeply passionate about marketing and branding and that type of storytelling. Troublemaking is also something that, of course, I am deeply passionate about too. But there's also an intersection of troublemaking and marketing, because you have to make good trouble to tell amazing stories. I think the people who are willing to be most honest and vulnerable are the ones who can create messages that really speak to people's spirit and hearts, that where people feel seen and affirmed by that message.
All right, to be continued on that front. Another audience question is picking up on boundaries. Women are historically bad at setting boundaries.
Yes.
What advice do you have for those who often quiet their inner voice?
Your inner voice exists for a reason. I think your inner voice is your spirit speaking, even when you don't have the voice, like the words for it. And boundaries are especially big because we've been told that we have to constantly self-sacrifice to be people of service. And I am very service-minded, but I also don't think you have to sacrifice yourself all the time and betray yourself all the time to be of service to others. Because the person you have to be of service first to is you. I can't be of service to everybody else if I'm not serving myself in at least some way and honoring myself. Like how I show up in the world is because of the boundaries, the access that I give to myself, and why I can show up and have energy on here is because I'm not allowing everybody to have access to all my energy all the time. You deserve to draw your boundaries because it keeps what does not belong out. It's like you think about yourself as like a castle. The moat, you don't let it down all the time because it'll be overrun by people. The castle is safest when what has access to the castle is friendly fire or no fire at all. So you have to be able to draw those lines in very clear ways without guilt. It might mean you say, oh, I can't do a phone call after 7. It might actually mean only 10 people are allowed at my birthday party because those are all the people I can deal with. It might mean, can I go off grid for 2 hours just to get my breath back? Sometimes I need to drop off the kids for 3 hours so they're not bugging me, right? Our boundaries exist to protect us from even stuff that we're not sure we need to be protected from. So I want women to not feel bad about drawing those boundaries. That's why I created the Draw Your Lines chapter in this book, because I know a lot of women are going to be reading it, but they have to get permission. And so if you needed permission, you don't have to get permission. And but people still need the permission. If you need the permission, draw your lines, like tell people what you want so they can then honor it. And I think that's a gift.
I think so too. Well, it's an outstanding book. I hope everyone reads it. And just thinking about our audience, we have undergrads, we have MBA students across Wharton and students at Penn. Is there a closing piece of advice that you'd like to offer for all of us to make good trouble?
Yeah, I think for all of us to be okay with being afraid and uncomfortable, we have to be okay with it, because we tend to think when we're afraid, we're supposed to just go back. No, usually it's a growth opportunity. Usually it's something waiting for you. It's a lesson that you need to learn. Usually it's to push you outside the comfort zone that is no longer serving you. So when you feel the fear, ask yourself what you're afraid of, whatever this thing is, whether it's the job related side, whether it's personal. What is the actual fear? What is the worst case scenario? The actual thing that might happen, the disastrous catastrophe that might happen. And then figure out, can you deal with it? If you can, and you're like, yeah, here's my best case scenario, though, the thing that could be really amazing. If the worst case scenario is unlikely, and if you're like, I'm actually just afraid of something that's not as real as I think it is, it's not as big as I think it is, I really challenge you to push past that fear and choose courage. Because honestly, like you're fine. Being afraid is okay, because you cannot have the courage without fear first. If it wasn't afraid, if you weren't afraid of it, if it wasn't scary, it wasn't courageous, it wasn't brave, it was just whatever, right? So you need the fear, honor the fear, make a friend with the fear, but still move forward anyway.
Thank you, Luvvie. This has been such a joy and a real inspiration, I know, to our audience. We're grateful that you were willing to join us.
Thank you so much for having me, Adam. Like, I've been speaking about your book too. I just had a speaking engagement and I was like, Think Again was one of the books that people should read. The idea of the Challenge Network is basically professional troublemakers. So, Adam, I am your friend who is going to now push you to be a professional troublemaker.
I need it. Please do.
I am going to push you to make trouble. You make trouble in your own ways for sure. But I want you to know that being agreeable is great. But in the moments when you feel like you need to say something to somebody and it's important, You got to just do it. And if you feel like saying it is hard, write them a really nice note.
Thank you, Luvvie.
Have a good day, everybody.